feeling like a little Elton John to spice up your Tuesday afternoon. Welcome to our member briefing for March 23rd. We're focused on the Downtown Denver Security Action Plan 2.0 today. We're very excited to talk about that program. But before we get into it, it's my pleasure to welcome and introduce Management Group Board Member and owner and CEO of Elements, Tracy Lounsbury, to provide some welcome remarks. Tracy, great to see you. Thanks for being with us today.
Thanks, Adina. I really appreciate it. I'm really honored to be here today, and I'm so proud to be part of the Downtown Denver Partnership Management Group. So to start, I'm going to give you a little overview of the partnership. The Downtown Denver Partnership is a place-based economic development organization comprised of over 650 member companies. Our work follows the Downtown Area Plan, which is a 20-year strategic plan designed to support the future of our city. Areas of focus include business and retail recruitment strategy, creating housing solutions, improving the public realm, mobility expansion, supporting entrepreneurship and innovation, and so much more. If you want to learn more about how to get involved with Downtown Denver Partnership, please visit our member and resource pages at downtowndenver.com. And now I would like to take a moment to thank our sponsor, Sam Kasparek and the Kairoy team, for their membership in the Downtown Denver Partnership and their sponsorship of today's member briefing webinar. Sam and the Kairoy team are great supporters of the partnership and are actively engaged in the partnership's city building activities, in addition to Kairoy being one of the partnership's downtown partner sponsors. Starting in March 2020, Kairoy activated its emergency crisis team, which met every morning, put in place new COVID protocols to manage its communities, protect and serve its residents, and support its associates, both on-site and in the corporate offices. Diversity, inclusion, and equity is an area where Kairoy was already strong, with almost 50-50 male to female balance and 55% minorities among its 200 associates. To measure its commitment, Kairoy conducted a survey among its employees, with 89% responding that they were very pleased with the company's attention to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And Kairoy is justifiably proud of having been named Best Place to Work for Large Employers in 2020 by the San Antonio Business Journal. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Adina.
Thanks again, Tracy, and thanks to everybody over at the Kairoy offices for supporting today's member briefing. My name is Adina Johnson-Deneen. I'm Senior Manager here at the Downtown Denver Partnership. At the partnership, we're here to connect you to resources and information from and for our members. As we continue to build an economically resilient Center City, we know that we're in this together, and we strive to connect you with information to help you and your business move forward. I have a few exciting updates that I would like to share at this point. Upcoming on April 7th, we have our development forum. We invite you to join us. We have the opportunity to get a behind the scenes look at some recent development projects that are helping shape our Center City neighborhoods. We'll give you a mini insider tour of the Evans School, the Hooper, as well as the Edit at River North. And we'll also have 3 moderator-led discussions about the neighborhoods these projects reside in. And you'll meet the project and neighborhood leaders who will contextualize these developments and give you some insight as to what is next for them and downtown. No doubt it will be an exciting program. As many of you have noticed, our skyline has managed to change in 2020. So great development updates that you'll be able to get at our annual development forum this year. Also, we're thrilled to announce that we're offering grants of up to $20,000 per tree planting area to property owners in downtown Denver to be used for enlarging existing tree planting areas and or installing new tree planting areas. This grant program by the Downtown Denver Partnership, the Downtown Denver Business Improvement District, and City and County of Denver, with fundraising support from private donors, has the goal of further growing a robust tree canopy in downtown as a part of our very important urban forest initiative. So Brooke will provide more information on that in the chat. Also, I'm happy to announce we're currently accepting applications for Project Propel. Project Propel is a fast-paced deep dive program offering new opportunities for emerging city builders to shape downtown and sharpen strategic leadership skills while navigating the triumphs and pitfalls of important urban projects. Through 2 cohorts each year, Project Propel will offer Denver's rising leaders an immersive professional experience designed to better our city for the benefit of all. The first Project Propel cohort takes place this May and will focus on mobility. Mobility efforts are key as we work toward building a city for everyone, and the Downtown Denver Partnership is dedicated to innovating and increasing transportation options that allow our city to grow and provide safety and mobility for all people using all modes of travel. I encourage those interested to apply to develop your network and leave your own mark on helping to build our city. Brooke will provide the application information in the chat. And feel free, if you know of anyone who would be a great person to join Project Propel, to forward along the application as well. Also, I'm an initiative to tell the stories of our work. We've launched a blog. We're full-on bloggers at this point. Our blog, The Compass, features stories of how the Downtown Denver Partnership is going a mile deep to build the mile-high city. Hear downtown's untold stories, learn about downtown businesses, and engage with partnership programs and initiatives. The Compass is here to help you and everyone navigate what it means to build our center city. If you would like to submit blog ideas, please email info@downtowndenver.com. The blog is a great opportunity to get up-to-date information on the work that we're doing and the people who are helping us build this city. So I encourage you to take a peek at that when convenient. Alrighty, let's move on to today's programming. Today you'll hear about the Downtown Security Action Plan 2.0, which, like the original 2016 plan, is based on input from downtown businesses, property owners, the City of County of Denver, RTD, Visit Denver, the Denver Police Department, and Business Improvement District. Bruce James, shareholder with Brownstein, Hyatt, Farber, Schreck, and co-chair of the Downtown Security Action Plan Task Force. Bill Zizic, KPMG's Managing Director of Government and Infrastructure, and Beth Moyski, Vice President of Special Districts here at the Downtown Denver Partnership, will discuss the plan and its timeline, national trends in security, how Denver compares to its peer cities, and how you can participate in making downtown safe, vital, and vibrant. The partnership is pleased to offer its members the opportunity to engage with these experienced and informed individuals about topics that are important to all of us. So we will be making time for Q&A after the remarks. Please add your questions into the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen, and we'll do our very best to get as many live answers as we can. Alrighty, to kick us off, please join me in welcoming Bruce James, who will provide the background for the Downtown Security Action Plan. Hi, Bruce. Nice to see you. Thanks for joining us today. We certainly appreciate it.
Thanks, Adina. Appreciate the kind introduction, and thanks everybody for joining us. Certainly, what a timely topic, and also a little odd, obviously, presenting this today after the Boulder tragedy. So my heart goes out to anybody who's been directed or indirectly affected. I know at our firm, we all sat nervously waiting till all of our colleagues were accounted for yesterday, and so certainly a timely topic for us to dive into today. The partnership has always been focused on keeping downtown clean and safe and vibrant. And it was really on the basis of those foundational principles that in 2013-14, we saw increasing security incidents in downtown. And partnership's never been one to sit around and let others take the lead when they can fill the gap. And so in the summer of 2014, Tammy Dorr and the staff of the partnership launched the initial security action plan committee that was convened, and it took nearly 2 years for that to come together, in part because it was a bold and innovative step. Very few cities had ever adopted anything quite like Denver's security action plan. And we traveled to Brooklyn, where we got to see Brooklyn's version that had been in place for 30 years, but also still pretty rare. And it was really an exciting time to bring it all together because it really kind of brought together all the abilities to communicate with everybody in a way that we really hadn't seen before. So the 5 pillars of the 2016 plan are really important to understand. First of all, strategy and management. Now that seems intuitive, doesn't it? Strategy, of course. But the reality is that we did not have a downtown security strategy before 2016. Obviously, Denver Police did and worked very hard to keep downtown safe, but we didn't have one that integrated the variety of interests at stake in terms of private property owners and their own security teams, including the RTD, who has their own security staff, and of course, working closely with Denver Police Department. So strategy and management was really a key kickoff theme for the first pillar of 2016. So what does that mean? Well, it involves steps as hiring our first senior manager of security. an important role, who oversees the day-to-day implementation of the security action plan. We also brought in Allied Security as our private security contractor. Never before in downtown Denver have we had uniformed private security officers throughout downtown. Now, of course, those private security officers can't arrest. That's not their focus. They don't carry weapons. What they do is they inform, they educate, and when necessary, connect with the police to escalate the interaction. But I think what's interesting when we look back at our experience from 2016 to 2020, what we have found is slightly less than half of their interactions actually were service oriented, connecting those in need in terms of food and health and mental health and physical health services. And really, I think that's such a critical part, because we all recognize, particularly over the last year or two, that people don't always need an enforcement action. Often they need a helping hand to connect them to the services that surround us. And through collaboration, we get a better response from those who are in need. So we hired the Allied Security private security team, who really have been an important visible presence on the mall that makes downtown employees feel safer when they're walking block by block. We also implemented a tracking system. We had never done that previously. We can now tell you hot spots on certain blocks, what time of day, what types of crimes. It's really interesting to see how it varies through different blocks of the mall. Because what you'll hear from Bill Zizic, who follows me, is the approach of KPMG in helping us, and of course we brought them on board in 2016, was really a data-driven analysis. You can't just track security from an intuitive basis, because we all have our own security interactions, things that make us uncomfortable, things that we want fixed. And I think historically that's been the way security's been addressed downtown. But instead, by bringing KPMG on board, we had the ability to have a data-driven analysis, and it really is fascinating to see it. The next was information and coordination. Events like yesterday's tragedy remind you how important this is. So historically, if you were, say, in Republic Plaza and an incident happened, that security team could call 911, but they didn't have the wherewithal to notify all surrounding property owners and their private security teams. So now we have the official downtown security network. So when real-time incidents happen downtown, it's broadcast on the downtown security network. We've had several incidences of being able to control events and certainly make them safer for our downtown residents and employees. And really, I think, if I think back, to me, that's one of the 2 or 3 most important things of the 2016 plan. The next pillar is communication, education, and information. So the second pillar was about what happens when an unanticipated event happens, and how do we make sure that we keep downtown as secure and safe as possible. But this next one is about, we all know there are major events. Sometimes they're planned for weeks and months in advance, but also they may be protests, as we certainly experienced in 2020. And so this communication plan also allows downtown security, coordinated with RTD and DPD, to go ahead and plan in advance of major events. And I think that while no city's response to the protest was perfect, and obviously we certainly respect and endorse people's right to exercise First Amendment rights, I think that in Denver, we did a pretty darn good job. As time went on, we got better and better about being able to make sure that people were connected and aware of the events that were happening downtown. Another one of my favorite pillars is infrastructure and environment. We can't really expect people to stay out of dumpsters if we don't lock them. So one of the pillars was to have private property owners lock their dumpsters. Amazing the effect that it's had. One of the other ones, though, that's so cool when you walk the malls, I do nearly every day when I'm downtown, is getting 15 alleys closed for private use only, and then installing art to make those spaces that previously were pretty darn disgusting, make them interesting, certainly fun for visitors to see as they admire the murals that we have. So I really think that the alley closures and the locking of dumpsters, you think about such a simple thing. It wasn't all that simple from a regulatory environment, of course, to close the alleys, but really a very simple step that made huge strides in it. The next pillar is regulation and enforcement. So you may recall, we worked with the city of Denver to pass the Breathe Easy ordinance, which prohibits smoking on the mall. Again, that was not an easy task, as we had many office workers who felt like their one chance to smoke, since obviously you can no longer smoke indoors, was to go into the mall and have a cigarette. But for someone who doesn't smoke like myself, walking down the mall and being behind a couple smokers was a pretty disgusting experience. So I was really proud of the staff at DDP for helping lead that Breathe Easy ordinance. And we also worked with the city to do a better job of regulating scooters. I think that'll be an ongoing effort as we all see them from time to time scattered around downtown, but we're certainly working with the providers and with the city to make sure that we do our best to keep the lowest number of scooters littered all over the city. So those were really important building blocks in 2016. So what did that translate to in terms of real stats? Well, here's a chart that you can look at. I certainly don't need to walk you through it, but it shows our ambassador logs and outreach logs and safety logs from 2016, 2017, and 2018. And what's interesting is in the first year after implementing security action plan, crime downtown, these incidents went down 10%. And the same thing happened from 2017 to 2018. And in 2019, we didn't see a decrease, but it did flatten out. Now, when you think about Denver in its amazing growth curve during that same time period, unheard of, it's almost unheard of in any urban environment, of course, to see a 10% decline in any particular year. But 10% decline year over year in a city that has rapid growth and all kinds of infusion of new folks, I think it shows that the security action plan worked. But as much as it worked, we also recognized even back when in the summer of 14 and 15, we're working on this, we knew this couldn't be a static plan. We knew that 5 years out, come 2021, we would need to have a new plan, or at least an updated, refreshed plan. Of course, what we didn't know was between 2016 and 2021, we would have COVID, we would have the protest. We didn't know the number of external forces that would impact Denver. And, you know, I think we all felt 2017, 18, 19 were great years downtown. Not perfect. The partnership never sleeps. We're always working to improve the environment and make it even cleaner, safer, and more vibrant. But I think we can now look back at 2018 and 19 in terms of restaurant revenues and hotel revenues and recognize what a peak that was and something that we're all anxious to get back to. And I believe we can over time with your help. And I think that the work of the security action plan and having our coworkers return back downtown. So we got together in the summer of 2020, which was an interesting time to come together. And I think what was fun about it, as it was in 16, is I forgot to mention that the committee that we formed in 2014 was not just downtown partnership members. We have an important voice and we get to exercise that voice, but it also was representatives of DPD, of RTD, the mayor's administration, really all working together, really sharing that perspective. So when we came back together in the summer of 20, that same team with a lot of new faces, but we did have RTD well represented. Denver Police was active every meeting. We had the mayor's office present. We had Murphy Robinson, Director of Public Safety with us. We had a number of property owners, and we made sure we brought in some new faces. And we also brought in some private security experts. So we had some really fun conversations, very robust debates about what does the plan need to be for the next 5 years? What could we do better? Knowing that I think security was super huge, important to tackle in 2016. I would argue even more so today, because while crime is down downtown, the perception of crime is not. And obviously crime in the outlying areas around downtown has in fact increased. So we recognize that security is a critical element to getting workers back downtown. Should I think in 2020, if somehow COVID had magically disappeared in the middle of 2020, we would have still struggled to get people downtown because of perceptions of safety, particularly following the aftermath of the protest. So I think this is a really important session. So I'm so glad you all are joining us. So you can understand that we are continuing to push this issue. We're going to make it better. But we also need your voices to articulate to your friends and coworkers that the partnership and RTD and DPD, they're doing real-time actions to continue to make downtown residents and coworkers even more safe. So in 2021, we built upon the success of the 16 plan, but also looked at some new principles to kind of go along with it. Things like making sure it's citizen-centric. As I mentioned early on, our private security officers are really more there to help than to any way escalate the situation. And I think that really focuses on the fact that it is a citizen-centric movement. It was collaborative in 2016 involving Denver Police and RTD, but even more collaborative this time around. We recognize that downtown doesn't stop short of the Civic Center, that we needed to embrace Civic Center and work with the Civic Center Conservancy and so see how we can help restore Civic Center Park to really the position it should hold. And it doesn't so many days of the year, but so many days it doesn't. And so we're working with the leadership of the Conservancy, We're also working much more directly this time around with homeless providers, making sure that they know what we do and how we can better help and how we can connect people in need to their services more efficiently and more effectively. So again, collaboration was always the principle of the 2016 plan, but I think even re-emphasized or emphasized more in the 2021 plan. Again, building on the data-driven principle, we have the master of data, Bill, following me, but it really is fascinating. And, you know, Bill's too humble to introduce himself the way I will, but he truly is a national expert on urban safety. It's actually unusual that he works with a private organization. Normally he's collaborating and working for local and city governments. But, you know, he really knows what's happening in other cities. And that data was important to us because we want to make sure we have best practices. And by gosh, if it's happening in another city and it's working, we're shameless. We'll steal that and use that very same principle to make it work better here. And lastly, fit for purpose. So fit for purpose just recognizes that while we couldn't, just as we couldn't have predicted COVID, we couldn't have predicted the protest, we can't predict the next 5 years. And what we know is we need to get our office workers back downtown. We need to inspire them and make them feel confident to come back downtown. And so our plan will be nimble. We're going to continue to meet, not for the next we're not going to wait 5 years from now. We're going to meet annually to review what we're doing, to make sure that if there's any tweaks we need to make to the plan in real time, we can adjust them and make them work. Because we're committed, along with all of you on the call, to making downtown clean and safe and getting our workers back downtown. And that means our plan has to be flexible and nimble. So we take these foundational principles and broke them into our 5 pillars that we continue with in 2016. And then we've broken them into short-term, medium-term, and long-term accomplishments that we're going to tackle. Now, I'm not going to take the time to read all of them for you. And in particular, Beth is going to tackle a number of the short-term initiatives and kind of go through what we've already implemented and what's coming down the pipe here in April and May. But I do want to touch on one. That is the code of conduct, because we've introduced this plan to a few people, and sometimes you get kind of a smirk when you tell people, yes, we're going to have a downtown code of conduct. I got to tell you, based on our experience at Union Station, where I've had the privilege of working with the private ownership there, it really does work. What we tend to forget is, many of our visitors are new to the mall. They're here and, want to enjoy the mall. And they don't know, for example, you can't ride a bike down the middle of the mall. They don't know you can't smoke on the mall. And so what we found at Union Station, which obviously has its own public-private interaction as a transit station, is that by having a widely disseminated code of conduct, of course, not everybody's going to follow it. We don't expect that. But what we've been surprised at Union Station is the number of people who read and say, oh, I didn't know I couldn't do that. And actually, there are some rule followers left in society who the code of conduct has a really powerful impact on. So we'll be kind of building on what we've learned from the RTD code of conduct, the Union Station code of conduct, and really just making sure that our visitors and tourists and conventioneers know the things that you can do and not do on the mall. And I think that will really be a positive impact on people's behavior. So we're excited to kick off the 2021 Security Action Plan 2.0. Really proud of the partnership and its typical collaborative effort of bringing everybody together, all the important voices, having all kinds of robust debates, and making sure we put this in place, because it is an organization of action, and this plan is all about action. So with that, I'm going to turn the program over to Bill Zizic of KPMG. As I mentioned, national expert on urban safety, really has some fascinating stories from around the country. We have been honored to have him involved in 2016. He liked us enough to come back in 2021. And I think he and his team at KPMG are going to make a tremendous impact in continuing to improve downtown. Bill, the floor is yours.
All right. Well, thank you, Bruce, and appreciate this opportunity to address the membership. And on behalf of KPMG, who also is a member, we are very vested in this outcome for the partnership and want to see continued success that I know has been observed, as Bruce mentioned. So just stepping back and taking a look across the country at some of the macro trends that we see in downtown public safety. And as kind of words that were said, I'm just one member of a very large team that pools this knowledge. So I get the chance to share that with you all today, but can't take all the credit. But really the first trend is around something that everyone will have recognized over the past year, is a pretty significant decrease in the utilization of downtown areas footfall, retail volumes, traffic has largely decreased. A variety of the essential workers that were attending work in downtown areas due to business shutdowns started to decrease over the last 12 months in very unfortunate outcomes. However, with the vaccine and with additional reopening plans that are happening around the country, we do see some of that buoying back. But of course, as was mentioned, when we have that kind of decrease in utilization, some of these safety concerns, both real and perceived, are observed to increase. That increase in security concern is, of course, was associated with national unrest and protests. Of course, there's always a backdrop you can't ignore of policing community tension, especially in urban centers. That said, as we all know, that was at an acute level last summer. And in many ways, things have moved in a positive direction since that, but we know that continued work and focus of police departments around the country, that continues to be a major area of concern for them and an area of effort. The third is in terms of increased public health concerns. Obviously, ridership and public transit, use of downtown malls and other outdoor facilities had decreased for a while. Much of that did come back in some cities, especially in the Sun Belt. However, there are lingering concerns, and there is a question of how long those concerns will last into future years. And hopefully, with additional precautions, vaccine rollout, additional stimulus hitting the economy, there will be more incentive for individuals to take another look at getting out and doing something fun, going out to dinner, frequenting some of the places that they hadn't in the past 12 months. But one of the things, of course, that the economic situation has caused is an increase in the number of displaced individuals. And importantly, we see the complexity of the needs of those individuals, both chronic and situationally homeless individuals, or even sheltered populations that are temporarily sheltered, that are going in and out of different elements of shelter, emergency shelter or housing. The overall situation is exacerbating the mental health and substance abuse needs of many of these individuals. And so that makes responding to their needs very complex, very difficult if you don't have the right resources in the right place at the right time. So in terms of some of the responses that we see being deployed across the country, firstly, last summer, everyone will recall, there was a lot of talk about disinvestment in public safety. And while there were some examples of that in certain cities, in large part, it was more about finding and scaling up alternatives or innovative responses that were already in place to some degree, and increasing the ability and the capacity of law enforcement and governmental organizations in being able to respond to mental health crises, especially. And I would say that Denver has been a leader in this over the past 5 years in the use of non-sworn, non-armed security officers that are doing the outreach that was mentioned, that are helping make contacts with folks and getting them to the resources that they need. The second key trend that we see, or key response area that we see at the present time, is with decreased utilization in downtown areas, many organizations, both public and private, are taking an opportunity to look at their security footprint, look at overall design of their building and the urban fabric in which they exist, and finding opportunities to change configuration, implement additional technologies, improve lighting, especially in areas like parking garages and other ingress and egress areas that the employees or frequenters of a particular establishment may utilize. And of course, it goes without saying that there's been an increased emphasis on better intelligence and doubling down on data-led security. And as you've seen as part of this presentation, the partnership had made investments in Eponics, a incident logging system, leverages data and crime information from the Denver Police Department, RTD Police, and a variety of other sources to make sure that it's putting its resources in the right place at the right time. But given the increase in concern, in many ways, the decrease in the eyes and ears that are out on the street identifying issues, having access to the right information to make sure your resources are in the right place at the right time is even a bigger issue of strategic importance than it has been in years past. And lastly, increasing in the public-private partnership level of collaboration across stakeholders, which we see embodied in this call, this forum, the organizations that are part of this process. And we do believe that Denver is a leader in this respect, having a structured security action plan to guide it into the future and to take advantage of the collective information, resources, and thinking essentially to address the various safety and security concerns that may exist downtown, both real and perceived. In our view, integration is the key. And this is really about ensuring a safe downtown for all. Without organizations like the partnership, oftentimes these types of endeavors are not successful. So if we could move to the next slide, please. We wanted to take a look at where Denver stacks up against a select group of peer cities. And here we see we have Minneapolis, we have Austin, we have Nashville, we have Phoenix. And we see Denver in terms of violent crime over the last 5 years in the middle of that pack. And even though that might seem, okay, well, middle of the pack, that's something. It's definitely not the highest. And in addition, when you juxtapose that against the significant increases in population growth, that is quite a remarkable feat. And we would note that over a 10-year period, if you go back to 2010, Denver is 5% down on that decade-long trend, which is a very positive outcome. Now, one thing I'll note here is that unlike the chart that was presented before, this is a citywide, not just downtown chart. This is based off the FBI's Uniform Crime Reporting database that they put out every year. 2020 data is yet to be published. Early indications, though, are that in many cities, there have been an increase in homicide, there have been an increase in major assaults in the violent crime category. And so both law enforcement and security professionals are continuing to take a look at how to mitigate those increases in 2020, especially conditions that have been exacerbated by mental health and substance use disorder issues that have been on the rise. When we look at property crime trends, we see a similar outcome. The 10-year trend I note here is very positive, 25% decrease when you look back to 2010. But of course, in recent years, we have seen this bounce around. And I should note that, for both violent and property crimes, we are at historic low levels of crime in virtually all cities when you compare them against themselves. And that means that crime will not go down indefinitely, and it will bounce around from year to year. And some of those drivers are not things that are within the control always of law enforcement and security. But that said, they will remain vigilant as they identify and address some of the drivers in these trends. With property crime, similar to violent crime, some of the trend we're seeing across 2020 and into early 2021 unofficial figures is that there have been an increase in both auto theft and varying types of property thefts. However, there have been some decreases in quality of life type crimes, such as trespassing and other disturbances in downtown areas. And the feeling is that a lot of that is because of a decrease in eyes and ears, as I mentioned, and reporting. So this is something that we'll continue to see as footfall returns to the center city across the country. Those types of reported crimes may continue to increase, but that's not actually a bad thing. That means that folks have the confidence to report those issues so that law enforcement and business improvement district security can take action with the right information. The bottom line on both of these two slides is that even though we have seen success over a 5 to 10 year period, and there is a lot on the agenda in terms of implementing the 2.0 version of the Security Action Plan, continued vigilance and investment in downtown security are going to be required. And we do really commend as KPMG the proactivity and the leadership that the Denver community has shown through the partnership and its stakeholders in taking this plan forward. And we are confident that it will continue to have a beneficial impact on both the real and perceived levels of crime in the downtown area. Let me hand it over now to Beth Moyski from the partnership to wrap up.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to wrap up and let you know what we're doing as far as the short-term steps underway regarding the Security Action Plan 2.0. And we're giving ourselves about 6 months to get these accomplished or very far along underway. So the first is we have already recruited our private security and increased them by 50%, and we'll be adding a few more. Those folks are in training now, and we're getting ready to put them out on the street and integrate them out there. So we'll see a few more people out on the street and bid private security in our uniforms here. And I think Bruce did a good job of explaining what they do. They observe and report, they educate and inform. And if things need to be escalated to the level of the police department, or if they need to do connecting people with outreach services, they're able to do that. We're also setting a baseline of check-in surveys with the same approximately 60 to 90 people who will get the surveys every 6 weeks. So we're have the same data or same people weighing in on what their perception of what's going on out there and what they're observing and experiencing out in the public realm. And it'll give us kind of a thermometer or check as to how we're doing and where we need to make some adjustments. And some of it could be as far as with education and information. Other parts of it could be with respect to deployment. And then our current communication networks are really growing. We have the public shared radio network that Bruce was referring to. A lot of the office buildings and also some apartment buildings have subscribed to a public shared radio network, and that's where they have a radio that connects to all of the other ones. And we started out with a dozen 2 years ago, and we're up to 33, and I wouldn't be surprised if we get to 40 or 50 by the end of this year of subscriptions to that. And that just connects all of these buildings in the 120 block of the downtown core area to one another, talking to each other. It was really useful this summer when we had those protests and there were some concerns, and we were able to get real-time information to everybody right away. The other part of this whole presentation is we want to tell you and ask you to help us help downtown and how you can help. And we're in the process of finalizing a mobile application where citizens, where people out and about can actually make the reports. We will be launching that in April, and it ties closely to the code of conduct and other city ordinances that are quality of life driven, the sit and lie ordinance that we have in downtown Denver, as well as the urban unauthorized camping in downtown urban areas. So that we'll be able to have that kind of report. So instead of tripping through several steps, it goes directly to the people on the street, and we can address things quicker. And we also helps us keep records on how things are going. That data will help us in the future. And the other pieces, we will have a security-oriented web page as part of our the Downtown Denver Partnerships website, and that will be launching in April also. So you all hear early and first. And on that webpage, you'll find ways on how to make a report to the police if you need to do so, how to handle graffiti issues with your buildings, and any other questions that you might have, or how to connect with our security personnel here with the Downtown Denver Partnership. And that's really all I have. I want to thank the people who helped us put together the report, and we'll go from there. I'm going to stop my share.
Great, thanks, Beth. Appreciate it. Thanks to Bill and Bruce as well. Such an outline. I learned a bunch, and I work at the partnership, so it's always good to have experts come in and tell us important information as far as what we need to know, what's happening, especially with something like the Security Action Plan, where revisions are necessary a lot of the time. So thanks for everybody for giving us some insight. We do have a question. If Bill and Bruce want to come back, share their screen and unmute themselves. Councilman Chris Hines is joining us, which is fantastic. And Bill, this question's for you. He quotes, an increase in the number and complexity of needs of displaced individuals. So just for some clarity, does that mean that this is a national issue? And if so, do you see a palette for our national leaders to address this increase?
Well, thank you for the question, Council Member. Yes, we do think, firstly, that it is a national issue, especially in cities that are sort of in the Sun Belt, sort of Denver and lower. I myself live in California, and we see this issue growing, exponentially by the year in terms of the number of displaced individuals, and especially in cities where there is significant growth in population, but also significant growth in housing costs. And of course, affordable housing cannot keep up with that, said growth. And so it is an issue that we see nationally. Do we think that there is appetite, even from a national perspective? In the last administration, there was willingness to look at things like the opioid crisis, look at other criminal justice reform that could have a beneficial impact at the federal level. However, much of this in terms of how these individuals can be dealt with and of course avoid the justice system and find treatment and not punishment is really up to the state or the local government that is dealing in that particular jurisdiction. And so we do think that there is an increasing willingness to look at that. There is a significant opportunity with the $1.9 trillion and in the recent stimulus that was passed for local governments and state governments to utilize funds in innovative ways, especially in areas that have seen an increase as a result of the coronavirus, both public health and economic impacts. So we do think that there is going to be willingness at the state and local level to tackle some of these issues and some resources to help handle it.
Great, thank you. Bruce, this one's for you. As you prepare to bring people back to your offices, are they expressing concerns about their safety returning to downtown, or is that not much of an issue? We know you're in upper downtown, your offices are in upper downtown. So any information there as far as even perceived ideas of being unsafe?
Sure, although I'll share one footnote. Hopefully I didn't seem too distracted during my presentation. Our first grandchild was born right when I was speaking. What? And my phone was exploding and I couldn't see the pictures until I stopped talking. And so healthy 8-pound 9-ounce granddaughter, our first one, Dylan. And so I was trying to keep it together while seeing my phone explode because I knew that had to be what was happening. So very exciting in the James family. But to answer,
congratulations, that's great.
Oh, thanks, Adina. But to answer your question, particularly being upper downtown, yes, people have been concerned over security, in part because obviously last summer and then leading into fall, there was a number of boarded up windows, which just makes people feel uncomfortable. And then unfortunately, we had the 7-Eleven at 16th and Tremont. But I'm pleased to announce that the 7-Eleven at 16th and Tremont has closed. And I know that the partnership is working with the ownership to see what more appropriate uses would be. And I got to tell you, transformative, I'd say no single more transformative thing in upper downtown in the last decade, having that 7-Eleven close. They painted the building, there's classical music blaring. It just changed the whole dynamic of that block. And our employees, because we're not back full time, but we're back 10, 20%, 30%, depending on the day. People have commented about how much better they feel walking on the mall, because that corner was so bad that people would just go the other way if it just meant not walking past the 7-Eleven. And so kudos to the ownership, kudos to the tenant who elected to close their franchise. And it just shows you working together, we can make step-by-step tangible differences. And particularly in upper downtown, that's really critical because obviously we had the highest perception of security concerns. And now if we can get Hard Rock to take off their boards and the remaining other boards downtown, particularly in upper downtown, it will make people feel a whole lot safer.
Great, thank you for that. Another question, and maybe this is for the group, Bill, this is specifically for you, but maybe Beth has some insights since she works with DPD significantly. Says there's a lot of talk about defunding the police departments across the country during the summer protests. So I'm wondering if you've seen that actually happening, and if so, is it driving an increase in crime in urban areas? And Beth, I would love your take on Denver specifically.
Well, I'll talk to Denver specifically, then I will toss the ball up to Bill. But there were a couple of attempts through city council to defund the police, and Councilman Hines can probably speak to that as well, but that it didn't quite go through. Now there are some budget controls that the city council does review everything and all the expenditures that are going through all of the departments, and that includes the police department. And so that gives them a little more detail as to what's going on and how the city's funds are spent. That it's one of those things, we haven't seen an increase in our city center when it comes to nothing escalating more than expected with respect to the pandemic. Haven't seen anything regarding defunding. Bill, I don't know if you have any information from our Minneapolis, might be the only example I can think of. Do you want to speak to that?
Sure, yeah, and I will say nationally, there have been isolated circumstances of where there have been cuts in police funding somewhere between on order of 5 to 10%. It's even in Minneapolis and in Los Angeles, it's nowhere near the, we're going to abolish the police department, we're going to cut the budget in half. There was rhetoric around that. None of that was ultimately followed through on. There have been, as I mentioned in my remarks, there have been changes that have been implemented, even if the funding has not decreased. Increased clinicians in cars, increased co-responders, better diversionary tactics. But these are all things that already existed. So it's more of a reinvestment of the funding within the police department and perhaps a little more specificity of the expected outcome of that spending. Now, I will say the prevailing wisdom right now, even though there were some cuts over the last year, is not the budget that is linked to the increase in crime. If there's an increase in crime in some cities, there is similar after what we saw with Ferguson almost 10 years ago now, there is an element of depolicing that could be at play. And so that there is less interdiction. But that's very, very difficult to track and to prove. And most individuals that work with officers day to day know that they're doing the best they can with the tools they have that are out there. But there is some prevailing wisdom nationally that every time we see that kind of backlash against law enforcement, whether budgetarily or otherwise, you're going to have some element of depolicing, which can have an impact on crime levels.
Right.
There has been shifting in funding, though. Some of the funds that address outreach teams, it's being managed under the Department of Health and Human Services versus the police department. So the services are still occurring. It's just being managed by a different entity within the city. That's happening here in Denver.
And I'm assuming that increasing, authoritative presence isn't the one-stop shop as far as how to make people feel safe. A lot of it has to do with the lighting infrastructure that we have on the 16th Street Mall and increasing the ability for people to see. It's also programming the street level as far as music and so on and so forth. So any recommendations from any retail or hospitality folks that have ground floor space to kind of discourage?
Well, you already named it. You named a lot of it. A lot of it is the music, play music, have proper lighting. And this is another ask of everybody who's attending this webinar is come back downtown. The more we populate and activate the city, the more life we bring to it, and the negative behaviors and everything sort of get watered down and eventually sort of trickle away. Because people, it's one of those, you always say you can't have nice things. If the furniture is nice, people respect the furniture. So we take good care of the furniture here in downtown Denver through our very effective clean services, our maintenance group. And then we also take care of the people with our public safety or private safety bid security.
Right. So, and, Beth, the outer space is a great example of that. Public activation at 16th and Welton that the Downtown Denver Partnership did as far as creating an outdoor space for people to grab food at local restaurants and then sit outdoors. And, we faced a lot of the chairs towards the mall so people could interact with each other. And, we've seen great, not only responses to that, but great activation of it. People have been utilizing it as a place to enjoy outside when it's sunny. Even if it's not warm, people are using the space. So it's a good opportunity for us to remind ourselves that what we know and what we feel like we know are probably two different things a lot of the times. So it is a great reminder to get people back downtown, get downtown reactivated, re-energized, and and we'll start to see even further decreases in crime and whatnot. So one other thing is, please expand on your explanation of the citizens reporting app. On the surface, it seems to be an extra layer in getting DPD to respond to incidents and concerns, which is already slow. So I just want to be clear, that app is not to be used to report criminal activity necessarily to DPD. It is to the bid security team, correct?
That's correct. It goes straight to our bid security team, and it's addressing those quality of life issues that we're talking about, and the code of conduct types of behavior, the smoking on the mall that's not permitted, the scooters that are not permitted on the mall. There are other behaviors that are happening outside of off the mall. Our bid security provides security throughout the entire 120 blocks. You may not always see them, but they're there. We have a supervisor who's on a bicycle riding throughout downtown, through the alleys in the upper part of downtown, as well as down in Lodo. And they'll respond to situations. If you see someone who's struggling on the street and may be confused or need some assistance, the first place I go is I put them in touch with our bid security supervisor, and they make a determination whether they need to escalate it to the police, or if we can bring in our partners at St. Francis Center, who is a social outreach group and helps connect people to help.
Yeah, I would think of it as like a data collection point, right? To be able to receive information about what's happening in those 120 blocks of the bid, to have a better understanding if we need to take more action in some areas, or we see improvements based on reactions in other areas. So it's really your opportunity to make sure that we're in the know about what's happening in 120 blocks, because like Beth said, the bid is responsible for all of that, and we take it very seriously, but we need the help of our partners to help us understand how we can be most helpful moving forward. And once people come back and once summer comes, I'm excited to see downtown activated once again. So that's all of our questions for today. Thank you, Bill and Bruce and Beth. A bunch of bees. I just realized that. I'm a little late for that game, aren't I? Fantastic to see you all. We appreciate your time and expertise and getting our members in the know about what's happening with the Security Action Plan, especially in this revised version of it. So with that, I will turn it back to Tracy for some closing remarks.
Thanks, Adina. So just to reiterate, gosh, a giant thank you to Bruce, Bill, and Beth, the three Bs. Yes, this is such a timely topic and important information during these really challenging times. And a special thank you to Sam Kasparek and Kai Roy for their sponsorship today of this member briefing. If you want to learn more about these resources, or if you have information you would like to share with your fellow members, please visit our member information and resources webpage at downtowndenver.com. So to everyone, thank you for joining us today, and stay safe and be well. Take care.
Thank you, Tracy. Thank you, everybody. Have a great afternoon.